Hey guys, today we'll be putting all of the stuff we've been talking about the Constitution together into a single video for your convenience. By the end of the video, you should be able to answer these 4 questions. They'll be listed again at the end of the video, so just pay attention, and when you get to the end, make sure you know the answers to these things. So let's start with a brief overview. Basically, the U.S. Constitution is all about balance, finding the right balance between different important things. The first balance they're trying to find is the balance between too much government, which they experienced under the absolute power of the British, and too little government, which they experienced under the Articles of Confederation. They're trying to find the right mix between tyranny and anarchy. They're also trying to balance power between the big states and the little states. The big states feel like they should have more power because they have more votes and pay more taxes, but the small states feel that their rights will not be taken into account if the big states get all the power. There's also balance between the different branches of government, and we're going to talk about the checks and balances that the legislative, executive, and judiciary branch use to keep each other in line. And finally, it finds a balance of power between the states and the federal government. The states are allowed to keep certain rights, but the federal government takes some rights away on issues that are really important, such as national defense and the economy and stuff like that. So to look at how they find balance between all of these different things, we're going to look at the 3 branches of government and how they interact with each other, and also at the Bill of Rights. Let's get started with the legislative branch. The legislative branch is also known as Congress, and Congress consists of 2 houses. The House of Representatives, which gives more power to the bigger states, and the Senate, in which all states have equal power regardless of their size. The powers granted to the legislative branch include the power to write laws, to tax, to control the budget, to regulate trade, and to coin money. The checks placed on the legislative branch are that the president must sign the laws. If the president doesn't sign the laws, then the laws written by Congress do not go into effect. Also, the Supreme Court, which is the head of the judiciary branch, can declare laws passed by Congress unconstitutional. The executive branch, which is headed by the president, is in charge of enacting all of the laws passed by Congress. The president himself is indirectly elected by the Electoral College. When the people who wrote the Constitution first imagined how this would work, they imagined that leaders from the state, maybe state representatives, would get together and send people to the Electoral College. And then those people would get together and decide who would be best for president. They thought that this system would protect the president from being simply becoming some sort of crowd pleaser, right? They didn't want the president to be directly dependent upon the people because they wanted him to be able to make independent decisions. This is not quite how it worked out in real life. The power of the president includes the responsibility of being commander-in-chief of the armed forces. This more or less allows him to mobilize armed forces, the Navy, the Army, whenever there is a threat to the country's interests. He also has the power to pardon crimes. He can ensure that laws are carried out. He has the job of appointing government officials, which includes judges. And he has the power to make treaties, along with the Senate. And last of all, he has the power to veto laws. That is, he can challenge the laws passed in Congress. The checks on the government, or on the president's power, are that Congress can override a presidential veto. Congress must approve official appointments. So if the president nominates a judge that the Congress doesn't like, Congress can just vote down that judge, and the president would have to nominate somebody else. And finally, Congress has to approve any declaration of war. So even though the president is a commander-in-chief, he can't just go to war without asking Congress for permission. And finally, we have the judiciary branch. The judiciary branch is made up of the federal court system. And the federal court system is responsible for resolving disputes and violations of federal law. Also, it's responsible for resolving disputes between members of different states. How this works is there are layers of different federal courts. And the first federal court that anybody goes to is just a district court. And there are federal courts all over the country in different districts. After this, if a case is really controversial, it can go up to a federal appeal court. And there the case will be heard again. Finally, if the case proves to be super controversial, it can go up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will hear this case, and whatever the Supreme Court decides is final. The powers of the judiciary branch include the power of judicial review and the power to set legal precedents. Judicial review means that the Supreme Court can look over the laws passed by Congress to see if they are constitutional. If it decides that the laws passed are not constitutional, it has the power to strike them down, to get rid of them. Setting precedents is another power of the judiciary branch, and what that is whatever the judiciary branch decides in one court will go for any other case that is like it. So any decision made by the people in the federal courts will also be the decision made for any future situation that is similar to the one that was heard in court. The checks placed upon the judiciary branch are that all judges have to be nominated by the president, and then they must be confirmed by Congress. And the idea here is it prevents crazy people from ending up as judges. They have to more or less be able to appeal both to the president and to Congress. So here's a picture of checks and balances between the different branches of government. So the executive branch, headed by the president, has the power to check Congress's laws by vetoing them. However, the legislative can check the executive by overriding their veto. The legislative branch has the ability to check the judiciary because they can confirm nominations of judges. But the judiciary can check the legislature by reviewing the legislature's laws and deciding if they are not constitutional. And finally, the judiciary can check the executive by preventing the executive from undertaking unconstitutional actions. But in response, the executive can check the judiciary by nominating certain judges. And in this way, all three branches are used to prevent any one branch from gaining too much power within the system. And finally, the Bill of Rights protects the rights of individuals and states from the power of the federal government. For individuals, it protects the rights of free speech, free religion, free expression, and free assembly. It also protects the rights to bear arms, to own private property, and to have a fair trial. It protects the states by making sure that the federal government only has certain specific powers, and any powers that are not given to the federal government in the Constitution are retained by the states, such as the right to regulate the educational system in a given state. Here's a basic summary. The strengths of the Constitution are many. The Constitution gives a balanced government to the United States that it needs to grow into a strong nation. The government under the Constitution is strong enough to get stuff done, but limited enough to protect the rights of people. And basically, the Constitution, once it's written, becomes the foundation for the USA's long rise to power. The major weakness of the Constitution is it fails to resolve the issue of slavery. And because it doesn't resolve the issue of slavery, different states are not going to be able to work together in the long run, and we're going to see a civil war break out because of this in the 1860s. So here are the video goals. Once again, please make sure you can answer these 3 questions. We'll be covering all of this stuff in more detail tomorrow in class.